October 31st, 2010, Halloween, Oak Harbor, Ohio. It's 6 in the morning, and Billy and Sue Liske are fast asleep in their bed. Billy had been hunting with his son BJ the day before, and after bagging a deer, a celebration with beer flowing lasted until the wee hours of the morning. Also asleep in the farmhouse is Sue Liske's son from her first marriage, Derek Griffin. But before anyone could enjoy the community's Halloween festivities that day, Billy's son BJ murdered his stepbrother, his stepmother, and his own father before calmly driving away. This case is about more than just murder. It's about mental health. This is the dark descent of BJ Liske and the Halloween murders that shocked a small town. Hey, y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Podorf. Welcome to Hitch to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends over there in Hungary.
I'm hungry.
I'm hungry all the time. Scotty's hungry all the time.
Sorry, that was a terrible joke.
Udvozoyuk.
That's very good.
There you go.
Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Then you can like, rate, and review the podcast so other people who are just like you and can't get enough of true crime can find us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below. You can find us on Instagram at Hitch to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And if you want true crime every single day of the week, please go join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws.
Yes. They're a group of maniacs.
My favorite people.
Yep.
Just go to Facebook, type in H2H In-Laws and Outlaws. You got to answer a couple questions, and then you are in. Please go join.
Yep.
I post photos and other information in there as well. I love those folks. We talk about them all the time. I'm not on Facebook much, but I'm in the In-Laws and Outlaws. I go in there. That's the one place I love to go.
Yep. They have some great memes in there.
We also now have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to send Rob some coffee. He drinks it every single episode.
Yes,
I do. You can find that link in our show notes.
And I have a special shout out today. A good friend of mine, Mr. Brian Popkin, he sent us some coffees. And Brian writes, I love your podcast and video channel. I'm buying you both cups of coffee to enjoy together one evening in front of the fireplace with the little man this holiday season. Thank you for all your hard work, Brian Popkin. And speaking of little man.
A
couple days ago.
Yes.
It was Scotty's birthday.
It was Scotty's birthday.
Yeah, the big 5.
The big 05.
He's a good boy. He's the center of our universe.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, tell the kids that, because they also had birthdays in the last week.
Yeah, but they're out of the will because Scotty gets everything.
Yeah, we tell them that all the time, too. Now, if I could just get them off my cell phone plan.
Yeah, there you go.
I have 2 grown adults still on my cell phone plan. Yeah. Well, I know. Send me emails. Tell me how to kick them off. Somebody send me one.
Well, thank God for Venmo.
Thank God for Venmo.
Yeah.
You can also send us a text. The link to that is at the top of the show notes. It says, send Chris and Rob a text. And I'm going to read you one from Troy in Heston, Kansas.
Okay.
Howdy from Kansas. Chris and Rob, hope you're having a great Halloween season. I love your podcast and want to hear a whole bunch more. You have a devoted listener. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Troy. Yeah. And I promise he has asked for us to do the BTK killer.
Ooh.
I promise to do the BTK killer. He's one of my favorite teachers at Writers Police Academy. She's Her name is Catherine Ramsland. She's amazing. She's actually friends with Dennis Rader and wrote a book, Confessions of a Serial Killer, The Untold Story of Dennis Rader, the BTK Killer. I'll post a link to that in our show notes because it's an amazing book. She's incredibly knowledgeable about serial killers in general, but especially BTK. I mean, you know, the shirts that say, "You inspire my inner serial killer." Yeah. Well, Dr. Ramsland inspires my inner killer on paper.
Okay.
And not only that, this past spring, I was on the set of a movie being filmed, and I got to meet the man who actually played BTK in the series Mindhunter on Netflix. Yeah. His name is Sonny Valenci. And when I realized who he was, I fangirled so hard, y'all.
She did.
I think I scared him. I really do think that I scared him. But I got to sit and chat with him for a little bit. He plays BTK in Mindhunter. And dear Lord, Netflix, please do season 3.
Yeah, he's a super nice guy, too.
Because in parts 1 and 2, as BTK, they're leading up to Dennis Rader's story. Yeah. By the way, he's also the Bud Light genie. Very funny guy. Very funny commercials. That was a really roundabout way to say, I've been working on the BTK episodes.
Now that we've got that covered.
Because there will be more than one. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So hang tight.
Cool.
Speaking of scary, like BTK, right. Tomorrow is Halloween. Woohoo. And I'm shamelessly going to plug my horror book. Good. Here it comes.
Go.
It's called Beauty. It was inspired by actual events. If you haven't read it, go get it, but don't read it in the dark. It's about an insane asylum where they were like farming people out without any of the families knowing. And they lost about 137, 140 girls mostly. And 60 of them have never been accounted for.
It's a frightening story.
It is a very frightening story. But I turned it into more than that. I turned it into a horror novel.
Nice.
Before I start today, this episode is just as much about mental health as it is murder. I'm going to give you some things to consider when I finish this story. With that said, let me thank some sources: the Fremont, Ohio News Messenger, the Sandusky Register, Find a Grave, Legacy.com, the Port Clinton News Herald, 10minutemurder.com, the Toledo Blade, and Oxygen's Homicide for the Holidays.
All right.
Nothing picks you up like homicide for the holidays.
There you go. I think I might write a song for that.
Oh, gosh. Put it in a minor key, honey.
There you go. All right. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
Meet the Liske family. They're a blended family, so let me introduce you to the whole lot of them. Okay. William E. Liske Jr., better known as Billy, or Wild Bill, as his friends like to call him. He was born on May 11th, 1957, in Toledo, Ohio, to William E. Liske Sr. and Shirley Pfeiffer Liske.
Saturday night in Toledo, Ohio is like being nowhere at all.
I have absolutely no idea what song that is.
It's John Denver.
Oh, my gosh. Of course it is.
Sorry, go ahead.
We need you to put on a little bolo.
There you go.
He had 4 sisters, Penny, Tammy, Dolly, and Lisa. It reminded me a little bit of the movie Ted, where they go through all the names.
Yeah. That was an amazing scene. I don't know how Wahlberg got through all of those names.
I don't either, but it was the Penny, Tammy, Dolly that got me. And then Lisa, she didn't get the E on the end of her name. He served in the United States Air Force. In 2001, he married Susan Morse. He worked as a front-end loader for a waste management company, and he enjoyed hunting and fishing and being in the garden, and just for the most part, being outside. He was a big outdoorsman. Okay. Billy and Susan had 1 child, William J. Liske, better known as BJ. So Billy J. BJ. All right. He was born in November of 1985 in Martin, Ohio, Ottawa County. But Susan and Billy didn't stay married, and when they divorced, BJ spent a lot of time with his dad on a farm that Billy owned near Oak Harbor, Ohio, in Ottawa County. All right. It was 99 acres and a 1.5-acre pond. It was heaven to Billy. Okay. There was a farmhouse, a pole barn, a couple of hunting blinds, and, of course, his pond. And Oak Harbor is near Lake Erie in Ohio, and it's a tiny little town of about 40,000 people.
Okay.
It's a really close-knit community.
It's about half the size of my hometown.
Yeah, it's really small.
Yeah.
It's really small. Everybody knows everybody, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit.
All right.
In the year 2000, Bill meets another Sue Morse Griffin. Sue was born on January 30th, 1964. Her parents were Benny and Edna Morse. Sue is from Oak Harbor, where her dad is a school teacher. So she's actually a local native. She was born and raised there. Sue was a 1982 graduate of Oak Harbor High and was the office manager for the Northwest Ohio Carpenters Joint Apprenticeship and Training Committee.
I'd like to see that business card. Jeez. Business card is like 9 inches long.
That's right. She was managing a lot.
Yeah.
Sue was a member of the St. John Evangelical Lutheran Church in Oak Harbor, and just like her Bill, she enjoyed hunting, camping, being in the garden. She had 4 brothers, Alan, Charlie, Bob, and Mike. And all I could think of was she's one girl with 4 brothers. It's a wonder she ever had a date.
Yeah, exactly.
Those brothers are always so protective of their sister, right?
Yep.
Sue was a divorcee. She'd married and divorced a man named Gary Griffin, and these two had 2 sons together, Derek and Devon. And when Bill and Sue get married in 2001, Derek is 13 and Devon is only 6. Bill's son, BJ, is 14. And all of them together are this blended family.
Okay.
Now, BJ had some emotional problems from an early age. It's hard to know exactly what was going on when he was a minor because all of those records are sealed. But suffice it to say, he struggled with anger issues as a child. He lived with his dad and his mom.
Okay.
But when he was with his dad, these two kind of lived like bachelors. Like Big Billy worked long hours. He's a blue-collar guy. He's not afraid of hard work, and he liked a beer at the end of the day. That's the kind of guy he is.
It reminds me of the scene from Step Brothers.
We're getting there.
Here we go.
But BJ sort of had a run of the house, and sometimes he showed up for school, and sometimes he didn't when he was in the care of his father.
Right.
But when Billy and Sue get married, Sue brings her 2 boys into the family and into the farmhouse on these 99 acres of heaven. Mm-hmm. Derek, the oldest, was born on July 30th, 1987 in Oak Harbor, Ohio. He was a graduate of Oak Harbor High and was quite the athlete. He ran track and actually set a school record for the 4x2 relay in 2005.
Nice.
He was into Taekwondo and had earned himself a 2nd-degree black belt. Our son actually has a 1st-degree black belt in Taekwondo that he got when he was a little bitty guy. But Derek actually fought for the U.S. Taekwondo team in Italy.
Wow.
And he, like his mother, was a member of the local Lutheran church, St. John Evangelical. Derek and his little brother Devon were both close with their father, Gary. And Derek in particular liked spending time with his dad on Lake Erie, or even without him on Lake Erie. I read that he loved to sneak away in the early morning hours while the water was really calm on Lake Erie and his dad was asleep. And he would take his dad's sailboat out or his inflatable dinghy out on the water.
Okay.
And finally, there's Devon. Devon was an accomplished diver for the Oak Harbor Rockets, very polite kid. He liked to sing with the church choir. Do you know anybody else who did that, honey?
Let me think, me.
Y'all, there's the cutest tape of him singing when I think he's like, what, 4?
I don't know.
And he can't say his R's, and it's the cutest thing I've ever heard in my life, him singing this little hymn without being able to say his R's.
Yeah, R's weren't part of my vocabulary at that moment
Not
in my
yet.
life. Yeah. They were coming, but not then.
But Devon likes to sing with the choir, and Devon and Derek would stay with their mom during the week, and then they would go see their dad, Gary, who lived in Northwood, Ohio, which was about 20 minutes away from Oak Harbor. Now, when Sue and Derek and Devon moved into the farmhouse with Billy and BJ, it was a little tough for BJ. He didn't like it that Sue had rules, something he wasn't used to at his father's house. they're like bachelors, right? And here it is. It's kind of like stepbrothers.
Yeah, but Dad, what if I want wings?
Yeah, Dale doesn't want Brennan and his mom to move in.
Yeah.
You know, he says, we go on riverboat gambling trips and we make our own beef jerky. That's what we do. And now it's all wrecked.
We have literally never done any of those things.
That's exactly what his dad says. We've never done any of that. But they all move in together. And just a couple years later, Billy Liske called the police in 2002 when BJ threatened to harm himself. And when this happened, BJ's 16. He was already on house arrest at the time. Now, I don't know what for. Again, he was a minor. Those records are sealed.
Okay.
But when the police arrived, he attacked them.
Wow.
And they arrested him. And he had to go to juvie court to face those charges.
Wow.
By 2004, BJ was lashing out at Sue big time. He attacked her while she was in the shower. Very psycho.
Yeah. Wow.
And in October of 2004, BJ got in a fight with Sue and hit her with a coffee mug.
Good Lord.
And then he stole her car keys. I also read that he used the keys as a weapon, like, you know, between his fingers, like to jab at her.
Yeah, like brass knuckles.
Yeah.
Wow.
In 2006, Billy files for guardianship over his son, BJ, who is now 20. And Billy and BJ are fighting a lot, so much so that Billy would have to call over his neighbor, a guy named Mark Grottle. And Mark and his wife, Michelle, knew of BJ, maybe a little bit too well, because they had lost pets. Cover your ears, Scotty. Particularly their dog, who was shot twice with a .22 caliber rifle and killed.
Wow.
That's called foreshadowing.
Uh-oh.
Did Scotty cover his ears or is he out of the room? I can't see.
He's over in his bed.
Okay.
He didn't hear a thing.
Okay, good. But Mark, the neighbor, would come over to the farmhouse to help Billy calm BJ down. And according to Mark, for some reason, when there was a fight or emotions would like get all riled up, when Mark actually showed up, BJ would calm down. Don't know what that was.
Yeah.
In 2007, BJ is hospitalized and finally diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type.
You think?
Well, this entire time, from the moment Billy and Sue marry in 2001 until 2010, BJ doesn't get along with his father, his stepmother, Sue, and BJ and Derek do not get along. They're 1 year apart. Devon stays out of the way.
Yeah.
He's the young one. But BJ is attacking Sue, and he also likes to turn to weed and alcohol to numb himself. But it only makes him angrier and more dangerous because he stops taking his meds. And this happens sometimes with people.
Yeah.
They take their medicine, they start to feel better, and then they don't want to take them anymore.
Yeah. Hey, I'm fine. I don't need to take these again.
And that's when things start to fall apart.
Right.
All hell breaks loose. And this kind of leaves Billy in a tough place. He's forced to choose between supporting his wife and stepsons or defending his own son, who's clearly mentally ill.
Right.
So he ends up kicking his son out of the house for his own good.
Right.
And BJ goes to live at a halfway house in Sandusky, Ohio. So he's in Sandusky in this group home, but he comes to his dad and Sue's house each and every weekend. Now, mind you, Derek and Devon are also still living at this farmhouse on the 99 acres. By this time, Derek is 23. He's working in construction with his uncle on his mom's side, and Devon is now 16 and in high school. BJ is 24 years old.
Okay.
Now, even through all the turmoil, BJ and his father are very close. They like to go hunting and fishing together, particularly at the family's cabin in Carroll County, Ohio, which is 2 hours away from Oak Harbor.
Yeah, I mean, I have high school buddies, and we meet a couple times a year, and we go camping, and we stay up at the lake house or camp out in the winter, and there's kind of a shack down there that we stay in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of the thing to do, especially in Ohio.
It's man stuff.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's man stuff.
There's
right
lots
there.
of testosterone being thrown around, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So for the weekend of October 29th, 2010, Billy and BJ leave the farmhouse and head up to the cabin to go hunting. Now, one source said they'd been there for an entire week hunting, and another said it was just for the weekend. Regardless, Billy picked up BJ from the halfway house in Sandusky, Ohio, and they headed 2 hours away from home to this cabin. And while they're there, they bag a deer, which if you hunt, that's a good day hunting. Don't send me an email that hunting's terrible. Yeah. You know, they're only allowed to do so many deer. And if you've ever been in this area of the country, they're everywhere. You're kind of overrun with them.
And trust me, in Ohio, there's a plethora of deer.
Yeah. And it gets dangerous for them on the roads. Yeah. You know, it's kind of like wildlife on welfare.
Yeah,
so
and there's seasons for that.
Exactly. And this is actually hunting season in Ohio.
Yeah.
October 30th, 2010, Bill and BJ come home from the cabin, and that night they have a little get-together in their pole barn with their neighbor, Mark Grottle. Billy calls Mark and says, "Come on over, I bagged a deer." And they're socializing, they're having a good time, they're drinking some beer, maybe a little too much beer. Everyone was in good spirits. The party broke up just before midnight, minutes before October 31st. Halloween.
Uh-oh.
Now, the plan was to take BJ back to the halfway house that night, Saturday night, but Billy decided he'd had too much to drink and he shouldn't drive. So a bed was made up for BJ on the couch.
Okay.
At the farmhouse that night, Sue is home and 23-year-old Derek is also home, along with BJ and his dad, Billy. 16-year-old Devon is spending the night at his father's house, even though he knows he has to be back in Oak Harbor at the Lutheran Church the next morning, the 31st, in order to sing with the choir.
All right.
They're having a concert that Sunday morning.
Okay.
Now, no one knows why BJ did what he did that night, including apparently BJ himself. But from midnight when the party broke up until 6 a.m., I don't know if he was off his meds or smoking weed, but he was definitely drinking alcohol that night. But this is what police and authorities have pieced together based on the evidence, what happened between midnight and 6 a.m.
All right.
Early that morning, BJ went upstairs to Derek's room in the family's farmhouse. In his hand, he has a hammer. He opens the door and attacks an unsuspecting and sleeping Derek, bludgeoning him in the head with both ends of the hammer.
Oh, man.
The head and the claw. He was struck at least twice and died not long after he's attacked, meaning he didn't die right away. He's curled up in fetal position with a major trauma wound to his head.
Jeez.
And it takes him a little while to pass away.
Wow.
After quietly killing his stepbrother, BJ locked Derek's bedroom door behind him. He turned the lock from the inside and then shut the door like those old doorknobs.
Sure.
And then he came down the stairs. Then he picked up a .22 caliber rifle that belonged to his father. BJ then opened the door to his parents' bedroom. He shot his father immediately 5 times in the head and body. It's now 6:30 a.m., and we know this because Michelle Grottle, the neighbor, hears the sound of gunfire.
Okay.
And this isn't something that was uncommon. They live in a rural area. It's hunting season. It's super early in the morning.
Right.
BJ then turned the gun on his stepmother, Sue. He shot her 4 times, including once in the hand. She's the only victim in the house that morning that had a defensive wound. Sue was also sexually assaulted either before or after BJ shoots her.
Oh, man.
When he's finished, he covers them both up with this comforter from the bed. He covers them completely up from head to toe, except Sue's foot is dangling off the edge of the bed. She's face down. His father is face up. In between 6:30 a.m. and 9:45 a.m., again, it's unknown what BJ is doing inside this house.
Right.
At 9 a.m., 16-year-old Devon Griffin leaves his father's home and drives to the farmhouse in Oak Harbor. He needs to change his shirt, and he needs to get his choir robe before he heads over to church to sing in this concert. And when he pulls up to the farmhouse, it's close to 10 in the morning, and Devon sees BJ loading stuff into his dad, Billy's, white Ford F-150.
Okay.
And again, there's nothing odd about this.
Right.
You know, BJ was just putting stuff in and out of his dad's truck.
Right.
What was odd was that BJ, who normally ignores both Devon and Derek, is surprisingly chatty. He asks Devon, "What are you doing here? Why'd you come home? What are you doing here?" And then he asks him, how long are you going to stay home? How long are you going to be here? And Devon's like, dude, I'm changing my shirt, I'm grabbing my robe, and I'm going to church.
Right.
Now, these kids didn't like each other at all.
Right.
And that's exactly what Devon did. He rushed into the house, up to his room, changed his shirt, grabbed his robe, walked out of the house, got to his car, and drives himself to church.
Okay.
Then Devon comes home from church around 11:30 a.m. And when he arrives, BJ is gone and Billy's Ford F-150 is also gone. And inside the house, it's quiet. Now, Devon is 16 years old, and when he gets inside the house and his parents' bedroom door is closed and it's quiet, remember, his stepdad's truck is gone. Mm-hmm. So he might be thinking, it's quiet in the house because Mom and Billy are gone, right? They're not even here.
Sure.
Devon goes upstairs to his room, puts on his headphones, and he starts playing video games. And while he's playing, time gets away from him. Devon's phone rings, and it's his Aunt Laurie Morse, Sue's sister-in-law. Remember, Derek works for Aunt Laurie's husband in construction,
right.
And Derek hasn't shown up, and he's not answering the phone. And on top of this, Laurie has tried to get Sue on the phone as well, and she's not answering, and Laurie is worried. And it's at this point that Devon realizes he's been playing video games for 2 hours. And Laurie calls Devon and says, have you heard from them? And Devon tells her that he didn't stay at his mom and Bill's house that night before. He stayed with his dad.
Right.
And then he went to the church choir concert and then came straight to his room. And his headphones have been on the whole time. He's just been playing video games.
Right.
So he hangs up, and now Devon's really nervous, and he thought, I better go look for them. So he goes into his mom and Billy's bedroom, and he can see that there are bodies in the bed, but they're covered up. It looks, it's like the shape of two bodies.
Right.
And he touches his mother's foot. He calls out to her. Then he pulls back the covers on his mom's side, and he sees all this blood. And at first, Devon thinks, this is a Halloween prank. It's Halloween. This is a prank they're playing on me.
Right.
That's where his little 16-year-old brain took him.
Sure.
He couldn't wrap his head around the idea that his mother had been shot and was lying next to his stepdad.
And why would you?
Right. And when he realizes that it's not a prank, his mom is cold, they're both dead, he rushes outside and he calls his Aunt Laurie back. And he tells her there's blood everywhere. And she's questioning him. She's trying to calm him down. And she rushes over to the farmhouse, and she goes inside and into the bedroom, and Laurie Morse is actually the person who calls 911 and tells the dispatcher there's blood everywhere. Quote, it's a scene from a horror movie, end quote.
Wow.
She tells the 911 operator that, quote, oh no, Bill is dead. The 911 operator is questioning her. Are they alive? And she says, oh no, Bill is dead. He has to be dead, end quote.
Wow.
And at this point, the dispatcher says, don't touch anything.
Right.
And she backs out of the room knowing that her sister-in-law and her husband are both dead.
Right.
The dispatcher calls Detective George Byington in Ottawa County Sheriff's Office. He heads out to Route 2, which is where they live. The Liske house was the last home on Route 2 in Ottawa County. And Detective Byington knew he was heading to the home of Bill and Sue Liske. Now, I used to live out in the middle of nowhere in Indiana. You grew up in the middle of nowhere in Sydney, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
The police know who everybody's house is. Everybody knows where everybody lives. And he gets this call, and he's driving out there, and he knows that there are 2 dead bodies. And he knows these people personally.
Yeah. A note on top of that, especially, back a little bit of time, we lived so far in the country that our address was Rural Route 7. That was it.
Yeah, and the postman took it from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't have a house number or anything. It was just Rural Route 7.
Yeah, and they're the last house on Route 2 in Ottawa County.
We had 3 houses on our block, country block.
But as the police begin to assess the crime scene, they show up and they're kind of taking in this whole crime scene. They realize that the older stepson, Derek, is nowhere to be found either. And Laurie Morse tells the police he didn't show up for work this morning. And not only that, police notice that nothing is out of place in this house. There's no forced entry.
Right.
Nothing's been stolen. And other than the dead bodies in the bed, it looked completely normal. Bill was lying in the bed closest to the door, face up, gunshot wounds to the head. It's horrific. And Sue's legs are off the bed, like I told you, and she's face down. She's covered with a comforter. But she also has gunshot wounds to the head. There's blood spatter everywhere. Bill was shot 5 times, Sue 4 times. They see the defensive wound to her hand. Blood spatter, like I said, all over the place. It's obvious they were shot while they were in bed. The sheets are bloody, and because of the blood spatter and the void pattern, it was understood and known that the shooter stood right in the doorway to fire the first shots.
Man.
So when he shot his dad, he opens the door and from the doorway shoots.
Right.
Police search the rest of the house. They go upstairs and find that the door to 23-year-old Derek's room is locked from the inside. So remember, he's not shown up to work with his uncle. And they're thinking, did Derek kill his parents and now he's barricaded himself into his room?
Mm-hmm.
Police break down the door, and inside they find Derek. Derek hasn't been shot, but bludgeoned in the head. There's blood everywhere. He's in fetal position. He dies from blunt force trauma to the head. These small town cops are shook. They've never seen anything like this.
I'm sure they were.
His head is cracked open, and they think the killer had used a hammer because of the cast-off of blood from hitting him.
Right.
And they believe that Derek was struck twice in the head. He was in this fetal position, so they believe he was sleeping.
Right.
And he wasn't shot. And because of this, police are like, he had to be the first to die. He was killed with a hammer or this hammer-like object, so he wouldn't wake up Sue and Bill.
Well, and the first thing I'm thinking of is that, BJ is saying he doesn't remember any of this. Well, obviously, he thought about the fact that he's going to shoot the parents, so he's got to take care of his brother first, and he can't make any noise, so he's going to use a hammer.
Right.
So it's premeditated.
Well, who can fight back? Probably not Sue.
Yeah.
But definitely Derek, the older stepbrother.
Sure.
Definitely his dad.
Yeah.
Right? And those are the first 2 killed. So Derek's the first to die, and exactly as you said, that's why he hadn't been shot. Then the killer went down to Sue and Bill's room and shot them both with a .22 caliber gun. There are no shell casings, even though this gun was fired 9 times. The killer had cleaned up the shell casings.
Yeah.
And they think he used a revolver or a small caliber gun, and he spent time at the crime scene to get all these casings and then cover up the bodies of Sue and Bill and then close the bedroom doors behind him.
Right.
Now, again, the house looks normal, not ransacked. They ask the neighbors, Michelle and Mark Grottle, if they'd seen anything. And Michelle immediately tells the police, well, in fact, at 6:30 this morning, I heard gunfire. And now the police are wondering, is this an outside person? Was this cult activity? I mean, it is Halloween.
Right.
But the crime scene didn't give them too much. So the police go to Devon. They're curious because he came home from church and singing with the choir and went straight to his room and started playing video games, and he's there for 2 hours.
Right.
While there are 3 dead bodies in the house.
So I'm sure he's considered a suspect at the moment.
Yeah. And he wasn't suspicious of anything because nobody was home.
Right.
And the police think that's hinky. But if you've ever had a 16-year-old boy in the house who plays video games with a headset on,
Yeah.
you get it.
Yep.
He was just doing his own thing. I mean, I think there were days when we didn't see him. They come up for food on the weekends or to go see their friends when they're 16, right?
Yep.
And at first, they looked at Devon as a suspect. They had to.
Right.
He was the last person to see the house before the bodies are discovered. He gets home at 11:15 and calls 911 at 1:30. Well, let me amend that. His aunt calls 911 at 1:30.
Right.
And they question his behavior. Why didn't he go looking for his family? And he tells them he left his dad's at 9 a.m. He came to his parents' house at 10, went upstairs, changed his shirt, got his choir robe, and left for church. And when Devon's dad arrives on the scene, he tells police, it's true, Devon was at my house all night. He stayed up until 11 p.m. playing video games. Now at church, they remembered him singing in the choir. The concert started at 10:30, it ended at 11, and he came home to play those video games. But remember, Michelle Grottel said she heard what could have been gunfire at 6:30 in the morning.
Right.
And Devon was fast asleep at his dad's house at 6:30 a.m.
Right.
Not to mention, Devon was really upset after finding his parents. He's in shock. And police actually believe that his emotions were genuine.
Right.
And they clear him, and he gives them the details of his day, the details that we've already gone over. Now, police need to search the house and the 99-acre farm and the 1.5-acre pond. They have a barn and some hunting blinds on the property, too. And Detective Byington sees this dock near the pond, and the dock actually had muddy footprints on it. It looked like somebody walked out onto the dock and then turned around and walked right back again.
Gee, I wonder what they found in the water.
Well, they're thinking maybe the killer threw a weapon in the pond. And I kid you not, they drain this pond and take a search party there and go through the muck on the bottom. This all happens in one day.
Wow.
They find nothing.
Oh, really?
They search the surrounding woods. They bring in the dogs. They bring in the hounds. They find nothing.
Wow.
This is all happening just hours after the bodies are found.
Right.
Now, the police keep talking to Devon and find out that on Sunday morning, Devon sees BJ outside the house and asks him, "What are you doing home? What are you doing here?" So when he goes through his day, he kind of leaves that part out, but then they keep talking to him and he was like, "Well, I mean, I saw BJ." And they're like, "Well, hold the phone."
Yeah. It's kind of important.
Yeah. So BJ was either putting things into his dad's truck or taking things out of his dad's Ford F-150 pickup truck. And Devon even says, this isn't really out of the ordinary. He'd gone fishing with Billy. But when he got home, BJ was gone, and so was the truck. And BJ was home that night after coming home from this hunting trip. So at that point, they don't know if he's a fourth victim. Is he a witness? Is he a suspect? And they know that he was there at the house because the couch is made up as a bed for him. So that's where he slept.
Okay.
But wherever BJ was, they wanted to find him because 24-year-old BJ is gone. The truck's gone. They call his cell phone. It's turned off. They can't find his location. His last call was at 2:02 p.m. on October 30th. And now they're worried. BJ's Aunt Susan and his mother both lived in Oregon, Ohio. So police go there looking for the truck or for him, and they find nothing. It's then that they discover that the family owned a cabin in the woods 2 hours away in Carroll County, Ohio. It was a place that BJ loved to go and where he and his dad had been for the past week or the past weekend, depending on which source you believe.
Right.
So maybe BJ went back to the cabin. And the police put out a bolo. Do you know what a bolo is, honey?
I don't.
Be on the lookout.
Ah, okay.
That's my police terminology for the day.
Okay.
Neighbors Michelle and Mark Grottel tell the police that there was some tension between Sue and BJ, and it started 10 years ago when she and her sons arrived and moved in with his dad after they got married, and BJ wasn't happy about the marriage. He had free reign of the house, but Sue was now playing Mom, you got to go to school. And BJ didn't like Sue telling him what to do, and over time it got worse. So authorities pull all the information they have on BJ, and they find all the reports of his violence, especially against Sue, attacking her in the shower, hitting her in the chest, throwing the coffee mug at her head.
Right.
BJ had beat her up. He'd shoved her around, and Bill had trouble controlling him. And the neighbor, Mark Grottle, tells police that even he had to be called over to the house when BJ was too much for Billy to handle.
Wow.
And the authorities realized that BJ's been diagnosed as mentally ill. He was most unpredictable when he would drink. And what did they do the night after they got this deer?
Right.
But what they also discover is that Derek had gotten into trouble with the police just a few months before the morning of these murders. And BJ was pissed. He wanted to know why he had to go to Sandusky, to this halfway house, this group home,
right,
to live when he got in trouble. But when Derek got in trouble with the police, he didn't get kicked out of the house. He didn't think that that was fair.
Right.
Now, everything is pointing to BJ. He's at the very least an important witness. He must have been there when the murders were committed. He would have been the last person to see everybody alive. And they're looking for BJ and this missing truck, and they call law enforcement in Carroll County, Ohio. They're like, will you just take a look, drive up to this cabin and see what you can find. And Deputy Mike Baelish of the Carroll County Sheriff's Office goes up to this cabin, and he sees a white truck that matches the description. So from the road, he can see the truck up by the cabin.
Right.
And he knows that the suspect, BJ, is potentially armed and dangerous. So he pulls his cruiser up this hill to the cabin, and he looks at the license plate, and he confirms that the tags are from Billy Liske's truck. It's Billy Liske's truck.
Right.
He calls for backup saying, I got the truck at the cabin. He's here. The truck is here.
Sure.
But BJ, as he's like calling this in, calling for backup, BJ just walks out of the cabin. He just walks out. I don't know if he saw the cop out there, if he saw Deputy Mike Baelish out there, or if he just wasn't paying attention and just devil may care walked out of the cabin.
Right.
But when he comes out the door, Deputy Baelish gets out of the car, he draws his weapon, and he tells BJ to get on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And then he held him there until backup arrived. Now, BJ, do you think he fought? What do you think he was doing?
Well, I'm assuming that he was very compliant.
Yeah, he was very quiet.
Yeah.
For a guy, who had all these rage issues and was always fighting with Sue, he was really quiet. They read him his Miranda rights, and they asked him how long he had been at the cabin. How long you been here, BJ? And he said, quote, about 3 hours, end quote. After that, BJ clammed up. No more answers. But they notice something about BJ. He has brown stains on his shoes and socks. He's changed his clothes, but not his shoes and socks. They take him into custody. They search the cabin and the surrounding property. They were actually looking for the weapons, a gun and a hammer. But what they found was an uneaten Subway sandwich on the counter. Because apparently murder makes you hungry.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
Police search Billy Liske's Ford F-150 and find blood on the inside of the truck. They find blood on the outside of the truck. There's a .22 gauge rifle in the front seat of the truck.
Oops.
When the gun is processed, they find the .22 rifle that belonged to Billy was consistent with the gunshot wounds on Billy and Sue.
Right.
Back at the house, police continue to search. They have the murder weapon used on Billy and Sue, but what about Derek? Well, as they're searching the house, police find a safe in the back living room wedged into a closet along the back wall, and behind it, there was a hammer covered in blood.
Wow.
Now, authorities have both murder weapons. They charge B.J. Liske with murder. And then the next day, Billy Liske's sister, Sue Dunmeyer, actually dies in a fire. And this Aunt Susie loved BJ. She acted like she was his second mother. And the day after the homicide, there was an explosion in the garage of her house. It was caused by her cigarette, and there were combustibles nearby. She only lived 15 minutes away. And family members speculated that she was just so distraught over the murders and the idea that BJ had killed his dad that she just wasn't paying attention to what she was doing.
Right.
It was just an unfortunate incident, but it's on the heels of Bill and Sue's murder. I mean, it's the day after, and Bill's sister dies in her home in an explosion.
Wow.
I mean, how much can one family take?
Yeah.
Prosecutors start building their case against BJ, but it was pretty much a slam dunk. The DA had the DNA of all three victims on his clothing.
Right.
They had the murder weapons. BJ was charged in Ottawa County Court with 3 counts of aggravated murder and each of the deaths, and was held on a $3 million bond.
Wow.
They had to take him out of the Ottawa County Corrections facility and move him to the Erie County jailhouse because one of BJ's family members worked at the Ottawa County Jail. Small towns.
Yeah.
But while BJ is waiting to be interviewed by doctors to see if he's sane enough to stand trial, he calls his mother from jail. And his mama starts reading the newspaper to him, a local newspaper, about the murders to him over the phone. And then she said, quote, "You did it. You did all this," end quote. To which BJ replied, quote, "Yes," end quote.
Wow.
And she said to him, quote, "BJ, how could you?" end quote.
What did he say?
Well, BJ told her that he wasn't in his right mind. And then all of a sudden he says, quote, "Mom, I can't talk about this," end quote. And after this phone call with his mother, he decided to change his plea from not guilty to guilty.
Oh, really?
BJ had been drinking. He was resentful. He had to go back to this group home. He was angry that Derek also got in trouble and he hadn't been kicked out of the house. He was angry about that. He was mentally unstable, and so he killed them all in a rage.
Wow.
The shoe print on the dock matched BJ's shoes, so he was out on this dock by the pond. We don't know why. Maybe he was just contemplating what he had done. Who knows?
Right.
On August 12, 2011, BJ Liske withdrew his not guilty pleas and admitted, while his family and friends sat in the courtroom, to Judge Bruce Winters that he shot and killed his father and stepmother and beat his stepbrother to death. He gave up his right to a jury trial and all appeals in exchange for 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole, because they were going to ask for the death penalty.
Yeah.
And all this is happening as his family is sitting in the courtroom.
Wow.
BJ's Aunt Lisa, Billy's sister, said in her victim impact statement, quote, "We just don't understand how something like this could happen. You see stuff like this on TV and think it will never happen to your family. You love someone so much and then they take something away from you. My only brother, my sister-in-law, Derek," end quote. She then turned to BJ and said, quote, "I just don't know how you could do it when he loved you so much," end quote. And the Judge Winters, has to stop her and say, "You got to talk to the court, not BJ." She turns and is talking directly to him.
Sure.
And then BJ had something to say too. Quote, "I loved my dad very much, and it makes me feel sick every time I think about what I did. I can't really explain why this all happened, but I think most of it had to do with my mental illness. There won't be a day that goes by that I won't feel horrible for what I've done. It's all my fault, and I don't blame anyone but myself. I never intended for this to happen. It wasn't because of Sue or Derek or even my father. I believe it was an internal struggle with my mental illness," end quote.
Wow.
He apologized to all these people, everybody he'd hurt, and he made references to Satan, saying, quote, that Satan was working for the destruction of our souls, end quote. Well, amen, brother, he is. But
Yeah.
you weren't saying not today, Satan,
Right.
on the 31st of October. He tells everyone in the courtroom that he prays daily for his family.
Wow.
Now, before handing down the sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole, Judge Bruce Winter said, quote, "The court is not in a position to make this whole. It is not in a position to bring back loved ones. The court can only hope to do justice," end quote.
Right.
So was BJ a monster or a mentally ill young man who maybe didn't get the help he needed? BJ's defense attorney, Adrian Zimmerman, said that BJ was decided by the courts to be legally sane. But he was clearly mentally ill. So how can you be legally sane but mentally ill?
Right.
And what no one knows is if BJ had been taking his meds on the night or the morning of these murders. But it is known that he had been drinking alcohol that night before and into the morning.
Mm-hmm.
5 years after the murders, on March 15th, 2015, BJ Liske was found dead in his cell at Ross Correctional Institution. The 29-year-old died of self-inflicted wounds. John Thebes, one of BJ's court-appointed attorneys, said he wasn't surprised that BJ had died by suicide. Quote, "He was obviously a disturbed human being and facing the prospect of life without parole. It doesn't surprise me," end quote.
Right.
Now, the psych evaluations that were conducted by the court clearly showed that BJ had mental health problems. And many people think he might have been better off serving his sentence in a hospital/prison for the criminally insane.
Right. That was the first thing I thought of when they sentenced him. I'm like, why are you going to put him in the criminally insane?
But they didn't.
Yeah.
Because they found him legally sane.
Yeah.
He's mentally ill, but legally sane.
I'd like to know how they came to that conclusion.
And I think mentally ill people are walking on this. They're walking everywhere. They're delivering your mail. They're giving you your dinner at night. They're telling you a podcast right now.
We're not one of them, I swear.
But it's true. I think everybody has a little bit of mental illness. None of us are perfect. Nobody's perfect.
Right.
But as for Devon Griffin, the 16-year-old, the only one who survived that night, he survived by being at his father's house.
Yeah.
Devon graduated high school. He got married on the farm that Billy and his mother loved so much. And he actually has a family and a son named Derek that he named after his older brother.
Nice. He's
been quoted as saying that he knows his mother would have loved being a grandmother. And I'm sure she would have.
Yeah.
BJ was obviously mentally ill. People with schizoaffective disorder or other serious mental illnesses are somewhat more likely to commit violence than the general public. However, most people with psychotic disorders like schizoaffective disorder are not violent. So he's mentally ill, but most of the people who are diagnosed with what he has aren't violent.
Right.
And some factors that may have increased the likelihood of violence in people like him include a history of violence and comorbid personality disorder or drug misuse, missing treatment appointments, and not taking medication as prescribed, which we know he did. And in the case of bipolar disorder, which he also had, some studies suggest a link between bipolar symptoms and committing a crime. However, more research is needed to understand how depressive and manic episodes of bipolar affect the risk of homicide.
Right.
Not to mention, the prison system is very ill-equipped to manage severe mental illnesses. And untreated mental illness can worsen, and people who don't take their medication, like BJ, are more likely to become violent. I do want to say that I thought it was interesting that he said Satan had something to do with him killing his family, because there's a more recent case in 2022 when a man named Tamir Williams, he's a barber in Racine, Wisconsin, he killed a customer because he refused to pay for his haircut. He also suffered from schizoaffective disorder bipolar type, and he believed that in that moment he was engaged in a life or death spiritual war with Satan.
Wow.
Mental illness is such a problem in our society. Early intervention is crucial. And sometimes that has to be law enforcement officers, as if they don't already have enough to deal with.
Yeah.
But there needs to be a diversion program where mental health professionals can oversee cases and collaborate with judges. And I realize that in a perfect world, that's exactly what would happen. But if there were specialized mental health courts that focused on treatment and support to people who suffer from mental illness with mandatory treatment plans and monitoring, because that's what BJ did not have.
Right.
Because there's so many people who say that we have a homeless problem in the United States, but we very much have a mental illness problem in the United States.
Sure do.
Yeah, and it's just like a chronic illness, just like diabetes. But like diabetes, it can be treated. If you go to our website, you'll find an entire page filled with resources for help. But if you know someone or you are in crisis, you can call 1-800-273-TALK or text MHA to 741-741 to reach the crisis text hotline.
Good.
But that is the Halloween Day story of the Liske family. And that's all I have to say about that. For nearly 7 years, Jane Doe has lived in the shadows, her past buried deep beneath layers of secrecy and silence. After completing more than was asked of her in her last assignment for the enigmatic Kywolf project, Jane Doe vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of dead bodies and unanswered questions. But now, as the specter of her past returns with a vengeance, Jane finds herself thrust back into a world she thought she'd left behind forever. When her former sins come knocking on her door, Jane is faced with an impossible choice: continue to hide in the shadows, or once again take up arms against the forces that threaten to tear apart the fabric of society. With enemies lurking around every corner and allies who may not be what they seem, Jane must rely on her wits, training, and her unyielding determination to survive. And while trust is a luxury she cannot afford, Jane must confront the truth about herself and her past. As the clock ticks, she realizes that the line between family, friend, and foe are razor thin, and in the end, the only person she can rely on is herself. Jane Doe 4 Charlotte is available September 24th, 2024. No name, no regrets, no mercy.
All right, there's a couple of things here. I'm really surprised that Devon didn't get murdered.
Yeah, lucky.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if he realizes how lucky he was, because
I think he does.
Yeah, why wouldn't BJ take him out?
He would have if he had been there.
But I mean, why didn't he take him out when he came home?
I don't. You know what? That's a good question.
Yeah,
but
because he knew he would be a witness.
Eventually, he would be a witness. The thing is, the other attacks were surprise.
Yeah.
And the element of surprise was gone when Devon shows up in his car.
Yeah. Now, the second thing is his father, Billy. Mm-hmm. Why would he allow BJ to drink, knowing that he was on medication and that this could be a problem? That's one of those things you go, dude, come on.
Well, and there was actually a police report where his dad, Billy, had to call the police. And when they showed up, he was like, I don't want to press charges. He just needs to go back to his halfway house.
Right.
And he needs to take his medication because that's what makes him better. And he even said something like he needs to take his medication like any person with mental illness would do.
Right.
And the problem with that is people who are mentally ill don't always take their medication.
Sure. And
that's why I was saying these programs have to be monitored. I mean, these people you have to watch them. And, that's a hard thing to do. There's no easy answer. This is a horrible, horrible case.
Yeah.
But there's no right answer, no easy answer. I feel bad for Billy because he just wanted to have a relationship with his son.
Sure.
And I think when it was just the two of them together, I think they were great together.
Yeah.
But
wow. Well, it's just a sad story.
It is. But happy Halloween.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's up the Halloween happiness with a little Bless Your Heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right, number one, I'm calling Immunity Schmunity.
Immunity is schmunity.
Yes. A Kentucky woman.
Oh, good.
Yeah. A Kentucky woman walked up to a random family on Friday and threw their 5-year-old boy in the Ohio River.
This was not me. I was not the Kentucky woman.
She also jumped in.
What?
Yeah. and told the cops that they couldn't do anything because it was international waters.
The Ohio River?
They charged her with kidnapping and assault.
Is the little kid okay?
Yeah.
That's good.
She just walked up and grabbed him and tossed him in.
The Ohio River is international waters.
Exactly.
That is so good. That's so good.
Number 2, what tag? A 23-year-old woman in Orlando was arrested for stealing armfuls of clothes from a Tommy Hilfiger store.
Okay.
Ramaya Johnson and a female accomplice fled through an emergency exit of a Tommy Hilfiger store with tons of clothing and hopped into a waiting car to get away. Cops were able to track down the vehicle used in the getaway and found Johnson, the accomplice, and bags full of...
Tommy Hilfiger clothes.
Exactly. Tommy Hilfiger clothes.
It stands to reason.
Yep. The merchandise still had tags and anti-theft devices, and she was even wearing a Tommy Hilfiger shirt with the tag still on it showing. So both her and her accomplice were arrested.
Oops.
Yeah. All right, number 3 again, finally. I know these are short, but they were very funny.
That's
number
okay.
3, nothing to see here.
Move along.
Move along.
That's what we always say. Nothing to see here. Move along.
That's it. While most criminals at least try to create a foolproof plan and execute it to the best of their abilities, well, then there's this guy.
Okay.
A South Carolina man stole a full-size horse, and for some reason, he tried to hide it. However...
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
A full-size horse instead of a miniature horse?
Yeah, like a full-grown big old horse, all right?
Okay.
The only problem was when he tried to hide it in his bedroom.
He took a horse into his bedroom?
Yes. They found him. The horse will be okay, and the thief is facing charges of burglary, larceny, and malicious injury to animals. Yeah, if you're going to steal a horse, where are you going to hide it? Well, I'm going to hide it in my bedroom.
Oh, my God. You know what it makes me think of?
What?
This is an old one. Airplane. Yeah. Where the horse is in bed.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was. So there's your stupid criminals of the week. Bless their hearts.
That's good. Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, all you got to do is go to the Hitch to Homicide website, and when you get there, there's a pull-down menu, and while you're there, you can also suggest a case or tell us about your brush with true crime. We have one of those for next week.
Yeah.
That's my amazing husband out there.
And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitch to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.
Happy Halloween.
Yes.